Well, here you are.
Good morning.
He's dripping all over the counter over there.
I told Dawn I had to swim on the way over here.
I tell you what.
It's coming down right now in Murphy.
Mm-hmm. Sure is.
I got my umbrella at the sheriff's office and went to the car and made it good to the car. And by the time I got my door open and got my umbrella folded up and got in the car, I was just as wet as if I'd never taken it. So, so when I got here, I just didn't get it out. I just got out and come on in.
Yeah, he came in the door shaking like a dog.
You have to get it off of you somehow.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So how have you been?
Good.
Good. Everything going well at the radio station with Tim gone? And
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a little break, though. I just got back from vacation myself and was gone for a while. And
he's allowed to take a day off.
Right.
Now and then. But he's got to take the computer with him so that he can help me with any
problems or anything like that.
I'm kind of ditzy on the technology stuff. So
about once a year, I take those spells where I want to sell everything I have and move and go somewhere else and live in another country or live. And being out of the country for about 10 days, I love vacation. I love being down there. And I say I want to stay, but when I get back closer to home, I see the mountains and it's just home. There's no other place in the world that's home than here. So
that's it.
I just love our area, our people, and being here. And it just I don't know, it just puts a little skip in your step, a little flutter in your chest when you start getting back to Murphy.
Those mountains.
Yeah, you just kind of relax, when you get back. But we had a good time, and I hope the Tim has a good time. And but like I say, there's no place like being here.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that time of year where we are closing out our budgets for the sheriff's office or county budgets in general.
Mm-hmm.
And but we're closing out our sheriff's office budget. Today's the last day of the budget year. We start a brand new budget tomorrow morning, and you probably read in the papers last week about them adopting the new budget and the changes that's been made and all those kind of things. And one thing about the budget I am happy to report, though, is that we are from the 2014 budget, almost 4 years ago, 3 year ago budget. We are operating $300,000 less in the detention center than we were 3 years ago. And that we are up just a little bit on the sheriff's side. We're up about $200,000 on the sheriff's side than we were 3 years ago. But most of that's in personnel. So I would say 3 years of budget planning and staying right there with a net $100,000 less than you were in 2014. I think that's pretty good money management and pretty good budget working there. So we're in a good shape at the sheriff's office. We are trying our best to keep the money under control and to keep those things down. That's one of the things that that I campaigned on when I ran for sheriff, was cutting out the waste and trying to get it down to a true operating budget. And so we're successfully doing that, and that's something I'm proud of, and hope that we can continue that out for years to come. But we do have, calls for service are increasing, more patrols needed, a lot of things happening within the county. So that's the reason for that increase in personnel costs there. So we have to have more people, we have to have more resources to handle all those things that are going on out there around us. And but I think it speaks very well of our office and administration of keeping that budget down around there where it needs to be. And so hopefully we won't see too much more increase over the next years to come. And a lot of people's asked me, and I'll go ahead and put it out there. They're asking me if I'm going to run again next year, and of course I will. I get good feedback from everybody when I go out in the public. I'm constantly every day having people come up to me and talking how pleased they are with the sheriff's office and what they're seeing and what's going on around. And literally, when I go to the office, I get several voicemails a day, people encouraging us and talking about what a good job we're doing and how proud they are of us. So it gives me some encouragement to put your name back on that dotted line and run again. A lot of people don't realize the pressures that go with that and that the problems and things you face with being the sheriff, but it's something that my passion is that I want to just work for the people of this county and just want to do the best I can for them. And it's not about me. It's not about any ego trips or power trips. It's about loving being here and loving my people and wanting to do the best I can for my people. And that's what it's all about. So as long as I can contribute, as long as I can do a good job, as long as I can help the county and feel like that I'm making a difference, I'll stay where I'm at until the people tell me I can't come back to work. And that may happen one day. I don't know, but it is a position, and it's a privilege and honor to do that. And so, it's just the people's decision, not mine. But I just want to do the best job I can do while I'm here. I said when I got elected in 2014 that God didn't promise me 8 years. He didn't promise me 12. He promised me 4, and so I want to do the best I can in 4. So, if He wants to give me another 4, I'll take another 4 if He wants to give it to me. So. But going back to talking about the calls for service and all those kind of things going up, I was pulling some numbers this morning and just kind of looking at where we were at and what was going on 3 years into this thing. And I found that we are almost, it looks like here, almost tripled our calls for service than in 2014. So if you think about keeping our budget at a net $100,000 less than it was in 2014, but tripling our calls for service, that's a monumental feat there in itself. And so here in last year, this time last year in 2016, we were at 13,924 calls this time last year in June, at the end of June. This year in 27, now that's just January through June. That's not the entire year. That's just 6 months. And so January through June this year, last year was 13,009. This year it's 20,169. So we're at 7,000 more calls this first 6 months than we were last year at this time. Do you know how many we had for the entire year in 2014? No. About 14,000 for the entire year. At this time in 2014, we was at about 8,000 calls, and this year in 2017, we're at 20,000. And so we've already passed the entire year that we had in 2014 as far as calls for service. And so as we see those calls increasing, our deputies doing more, investigating more crime, solving more crime, putting more people in jail, doing more community outreach and relations with the community, working with the school systems, doing all these additional things. Like I say, it's why I keep going back to what a monumental feat it is to keep that budget down as low as we've kept it. A lot of people don't realize how much money it takes to make the wheels go round in the operation. We got about 107 employees. We've got to do everything from answering calls to courtroom security to transports to working at a detention center, to sex offender registrations, victims advocacy units, civil process. I mean, we could just keep going on and on and on about the gun permits, purchase permits, about all the different things that we do at the sheriff's office. And so we have surrounded ourselves with a good group of people, with a good group of administration, and people that's truly concerned about the community and doing the best job they can do for the community. I also have what sounds like maybe a little bit of bad news, but it really is good news, and I'll explain why. I looked at our breaking and enterings, where we range in that, because people always want to know about houses being broken into, what we're doing there about our breaking and enterings. Last year in June, in 2016, we had 29 breaking and enterings for the month. I think it was 29 or 30. This year in June, we've got 36. So that means we got more than we did last year, and that's the bad news, right? But when I look back and I looked at how many we have from January to June, I looked, and every month other than June had less breaking and enterings. June was the only month that had more than last year. So last year in 2016, for the year, or for this time of the year, we had 172 breaking and enterings in 2016 from January to June. In 2017, this year, up until this point, we've got 145. So that's about 27 less breaking and enterings this year than we've had last year at this time. So we're hopefully can keep this trend going throughout the summer and keep it going throughout the rest of the year. And like I say, June was the only month that we had more than we did last year, and that was 6 more than we did last year. So we're on this trend of breaking and enterings going down, and so we want to keep it on that trend. And hopefully by the end of the year, by January 1, we can say for the entire year we've had less than we did in 2016. So so far, 6 months.
Drug arrests going up.
Right.
Your breaking and enterings are gonna go down.
That's exactly right. All of our drug arrests have went out the roof, and so our breaking and enterings are going down. Chief Thigpen was compiling some information yesterday for the Scout. They were asking, they were wanting to do an article on some things about the drug use and stuff, and so we were compiling numbers for them. And I can't tell you the numbers of everything, because I don't remember. I don't have them here in front of me. But it seems like we have seized this year something in the amount of, and we're not talking about marijuana plants. We're talking about just off the street. Mm-hmm. We have seized about 10 pounds of marijuana. We've seized about 1.5 pounds of methamphetamine. We have seized about, I think it was about, I can't remember now, 100 and some grams, I don't remember, of heroin that we've seized off the street, not counting your pills and all your other illicit drugs that come with that. So our officers are out there working, our canine teams are working, our drug investigators are working, and we're putting more and more of these people off the street and getting them put in jail. And subsequently, those breaking and enterings and larcenies and all those other things are going down because of it. And we're just now getting to a place that we wanted to get to, where we're starting to see that happen. It's taken us several years to get things in place, to get things in order, get the right personnel in the right places, to see what works, what doesn't work. And we have recently been able to put some major drug dealers in jail and some people who supply in the streets with this. And so we're starting to see the fruits of our labor now, about 3 years in. And so hopefully we can keep that going. And as the years go by, we can see that doing more and more. I will tell you this, that we can tell you of that we know from interviews and from talking with people, that we know of about 8 to 10 drug dealers that we had when I took over in 2014 that was major suppliers, that has completely left the county and went to live in other counties because they knew.
That's good for us and bad for them.
It is. But fortunately, I'm the sheriff of Cherokee County. I'm not the sheriff of Macon or Clay or Graham or any of these others. So my concern is with Cherokee County. So even though it may be bad for my fellow sheriffs in these other counties that the people are moving to their counties, we're putting enough pressure on them here to where they don't want to be in Cherokee County anymore because they know they're going to get caught here. Mm-hmm. And we are trying to work more and more with the federal system and state systems to go in other places in the state. A lot of our drugs are coming from Georgia and up, so we work with Georgia authorities, with all of our surrounding counties, with the GBI, DEA, FBI, all those people down in Georgia, from their offices, and we are currently working on some things from down on that end as far as cutting that supply route off. So a lot of our officers, sometimes our drug officers, may spend a day or two and may spend some time down in Georgia doing undercover operations and things, but those directly affect Cherokee County. And so our efforts down there, even though we may be spending time helping people in another state, we're still doing that for the purpose of cutting off our supplies to Cherokee County. And so we're working not only just here in Cherokee County, but we're working in all of our surrounding counties and in other states, just doing everything we can to try to cut those supply lines off. And we don't have any grand delusions that we're going to be completely drug free and that we're going to stop it. We don't have any ideas of that, but what we do is we do want to make it hard on them. We want to make it very difficult. And we want to make it to where they're not dealing out in the open and they're not doing things on the street where everybody's watching and everything's happening. We want them to be scared when they're doing it. So that's kind of what our plan is and what our goal is. And if that was to some way, somehow work out to where we're drug-free in Cherokee County and we have no drugs here, that would be wonderful. But we know that as long as there's a demand, there's going to be a supply coming in. So as long as people want it, they're going to find it and they're going to get it. So. But we can make it difficult on them, and I'm very proud of my staff and what they're doing, and we just hope they keep it up and keep up the good work there. So are you changing gears just a little bit? Have you got any plans for 4th of July?
No, I'll be here.
You'll be here. You'll be working.
I'll be working.
Yeah.
And, we'll have a party line minus fireworks.
Right.
Fireworks here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not going to the race track or anything like that, or
That's Monday.
Yeah.
Monday night. No.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what we'll be doing. We're going to try to have enough officers and people out to try to hit the local fireworks in the area and try to get to the Conahita Park. I know they'll be doing a lot of things during that day at Conahita Park all day long, and I know that's in the city limits, and Murphy PD handles most of that, and subsequently in Andrews. Andrews Police Department will be handling that. But we like to have a additional presence to be around to kind of help them a little bit because of the crowds and things that are coming in. And, I just want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July and Independence Day and all those kind of things. And we typically at this time of the year, people ask, and I get asked at churches all the time, especially, to talk about the history of the flag and to talk about those things from the founding fathers that led up to where we are today. And if we have time, I may do that in a little bit. But one thing I want to talk about today as we go on about the 4th of July and those things is changing gears just a little bit away from the sheriff's office, but it's about the Declaration of Independence and where we are in this country. I'm even though I'm conservative, even though I'm a Republican Party and conservative, I want people to know, and even my party understands this and realizes this, my allegiance is not to my party. My allegiance is to my country. And my allegiance is to the flag and to what it represents and the Constitution of the United States. And even though that I am conservative, even though I am Republican, and that's the way I believe, my allegiance is to the continuation of this country and to the Constitution. In my office, I have a flag on the wall, and I have the Declaration of Independence one side of it, the Constitution on the other side, and the Pledge of Allegiance above it. And so, I look at that every day when I come in and realize that even with the office of sheriff, even with the election process and those type of things, we are where we are because of what our founding fathers did and because of their dedication. And most people, if you ask them to what is in the Declaration of Independence, most people don't even realize what's in it. They don't even know what's in it. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I want to read the first paragraph, and then I want to paraphrase some other things in here. But in Congress on July 4th of 1776, it has the Declaration of Independence, and it says the unanimous, I got my tongue tied all of a sudden, the unanimous declaration of the 13 states of America, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and the law and of nature's God entitles them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. And it goes on to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights our governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And I'm not going to read the rest of that. It goes on from there. But the rest of that Declaration of Independence lays out the reasons why they were declaring their independence. It talks about the king of Britain, and it talks about how he's refused to adhere to the laws of the land. It goes on to talk about how he's passed laws that prevents the judicial system from doing what they need to do, that makes their allegiance to him and not to the country. It goes on to talk about how they have called the legislative bodies together in unusual places and unusual times to try to make it as discomfortable to them as they could so they wouldn't govern correctly, and the king could pass things that he wanted to pass because people wouldn't show up and they wouldn't know when time to meet and all those kind of things. It goes on to talk about that he keeps an army ready at all times against the country itself, but even at times of peace. And then it talks about how that they are just kind of oppressing the country, and how they have petitioned over and over and over again to release them from this oppression, and the king refused to. And that's kind of what's in the rest of this Declaration of Independence. But I want to cut to the chase and to the very end of this. And at the very end of the Declaration of Independence, it says, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. In other words, what these people were saying, these original people that was over the government, that was forming this new government, this new land, they were laying out all these reasons why they were basically defecting from Britain and why they were starting their own country and why they should be given the power of war and the power of trade and commerce and why they felt like they should do these things. They finished all that up by saying, we realize that we know when I signed this piece of paper, that when I put my name down here, that we're putting our lives on the line. I understand that when I do that, that I'm losing our well-being, or as far as our the way the government of Britain funds us and the way they give us money. I know I'm losing that. I know we're losing all those type of things. But they go on to say, but it's our sacred honor. This is the right thing to do. This is what we feel like we should do. And we know that when this was signed, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, the big John Hancock, right? The big signature on the front. It has been said that they asked John Hancock why he signed his signature so big on the front. And he stated that he signed it big enough that the king could see it without wearing his glasses. And so they were putting their lives and they're putting all this stuff out in the forefront to form this new country, and they were going to suffer because of it. Their families were going to suffer because of it. They had no guarantee this would even be successful. They had no guarantee they'd even survive it. But they felt it important enough to form the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. They thought it important enough to start this new country, to start off in a place of freedom, a place where they wouldn't be persecuted, a place where they could have religious freedoms, a place where they could have financial freedoms, a place where they could defend themselves. And they found it that important to do that. Subsequently, later on forming the Constitution and forming a flag and all those type of things, they formed a flag about a year later. And so they started putting this flag together, and they began to try to figure out how this was going to come about, how this new government was going to be. And Britain declared war on them because of this Declaration of Independence, because they decided that they were going to be free men and women, and because they decided that they were going to declare their independence away from Britain. Britain sent a complete armada of ships over to annihilate them, to force them into surrender and to come back to the king. There was a place in Fort McHenry years later, I think it was 1814, the Battle of 1812 was going on, and it was September of 1814, that the ships had been in battle, they had been fighting for all these years, and this was their last-ditch effort to try to force the people to surrender. There was some prisoners that was taken from Fort McHenry, and a lawyer by the name of Francis Scott Key decided that he would go out to the ship and that he would try to negotiate a release of these prisoners. And while he was out on the ship, on one of the British ships, a prisoner ship, trying to negotiate the release of the prisoners underneath, they told Francis Scott Key that they would give the prisoners up, but it was not going to matter because they were fixing to bomb Fort McHenry, and that he could not go back to shore. He had to stay on the ship. And what they found was that as the bombs started falling, as they began firing upon Fort McHenry, they gave them a way out. They gave them a way to surrender. And the way they gave them to surrender was to do away with the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, to rip it up and to tear it up and to lower the flag. And if they would just lower that flag and let the flag come down, that they would quit bombing them. Now, you got to understand also that Fort McHenry was primarily a civilian fort. Even though it was a military fort, there were women and children that lived there. There were schools there. There were things there that the whole fort was full of civilian people. And so they give them a way out. As night began to fall, as the bombing continued, and they began to shell the fort there, it was said that the men from down under the ship that was in the cargo holds, that was the prisoners, would yell up to Francis Scott Key, is the flag still there? Is it still flying? Is it still waving? And he would report back down, yes, it's still there. It's still flying throughout the night as the bombs would explode, as the rockets would explode, and as the night sky would illuminate, they could still see that flag flying. And so they began to pray all night long, Lord, please let that flag fly. Don't let it fall. Don't let them surrender. And if it means our death, still let it fly, because this is so important to us. And the story goes that the flag began getting direct hit several times, but it began still sideways, and it was crooked, and it was ripped, and it was battered, but it still flew, and it was still there. And the British reconnaissance couldn't understand why that flag is still flying, why it's still there. And so they give them everything they had. They threw every shell, every bomb, everything they had to Fort McHenry. And the next morning, as the fog risen, and as the light began to come up, and the sun began to shine, and the smoke began to clear, that flag was still flying. They hadn't surrendered throughout the night. With being depleted with resources, being depleted with ammunition, the British Armada released the prisoners. They let Francis Scott Key and the prisoners go back to shore, and they returned back to Britain defeated. And Francis Scott Key reported that as he began to come on shore and look at that crooked flag and look at what had happened there through the destruction throughout the night, he realized why that flag was still flying. That men throughout the night kissed their wives and children goodbye, and they went out and physically took hold of that flagpole, and they went out and physically took a grip of that pole, and the bombs would hit them and kill them. And their dead bodies would stack up and pile up around that pole, and the next man would come out and take a hold of it. And one by one throughout the night, knowing they were going to be killed, they would come out and physically grip that pole and take a hold of it. And what was holding that flag up was the dead bodies of the soldiers that surrounded it. And when I think about that, and I think about what Francis Scott Key had written about their Star Spangled Banner, and about giving proof through the night that the flag was still there when the bombs were bursting in the air. It gave proof, and letting that flag wave and letting these things happen. I cannot hear that song anymore since I heard that story, or I can't say the Pledge of Allegiance, or I can't think about the founding of our country without thinking about those things and thinking about what these men have done just so that you and I could be free today, some 300 years later, and when you think about these things, and you think about as we come up, and as we think about our history and where we come from, we wouldn't be here. We would be under British rule right now if it wasn't for these courageous men and women who would give their lives for us to be where we are today. And so when you think about the flag and you think about the way it is today, it consists of 13 horizontal stripes. You have 7 red and 6 white. And the stripes represent the original 13 colonies, and that give their lives for us, and that the 50 stars represents the 50 states of the Union. And the colors of the flag are symbolic as well. It symbolizes the hardness and valor of the red, and the white symbolizes the purity and innocence, and the blue represents the vigilance and perseverance and justice of this new country. And so when you think about that, and you think about what the flag represents, that's why, and because they wouldn't let that flag touch the ground, that's why we don't let the flag touch the ground today. That's why we don't allow people to trample the flag and step on it. That's why we don't allow people to burn the flag, and that's why we don't allow these things. And you see these protests, and you see all these things going on around the country. But I want to remind people that still in North Carolina, it's against the law to burn a flag. It's against the law to trample a flag. It's against the law to do these things. And that's why that we're so passionate about this. And I know my fellow police officers in Murphy Police and Andrews Police and the Highway Patrol, and I know all these people that I talk to about this, how we're passionate about if we have riots or protests here, about enforcing those laws, about making sure that flag is not trampled or burned, that's a priority for us. And so we need to understand where we come from, because we can't understand where we're going if we don't understand where we came from. And when we look at our turmoil of our country that is in today, and we look at we got bigger problems. I know people get hung up on this, but we got bigger problems than just the presidency of the United States. We have problems in Congress. We have problems in the judicial system. We have problems all over in the United States. But I tell you what, the United States is still the best country in the world that I feel like. And I feel like that I wouldn't want to live anywhere else here except for here in the United States. And I was talking about coming back home and coming back to the mountains, and this is where my home is. This is where I want to be, and I still feel like I live in the best place you could live in the world, and we just want to make sure that we understand where we come from on that. When we celebrate the 4th of July, that it's more about this. It's more about our history. It's more about where we come from. And it's less about the fireworks. It's less about the hot dogs. It's less about those things. And even though we can have fun, we have a good time, let us remember where we come from and let us remember our history. And I just want to thank everybody for the support. I want to thank everybody for the encouragement. I realize that even with the office of sheriff, I couldn't be here today and I couldn't be doing the things that I'm doing except for these men and women who gave their lives for us. And so I want to tell everybody out there a happy 4th of July, and God bless you.
Thank you. Let's take a look at the weather, brought to you by Carpet Mart.